Welcome to Takeaways. My name is Jordan Brooks, Director of Market Analytics with ALN Apartment Data, and welcome to the new year. Our monthly newsletter this month was titled 2025 Multifamily Recovery Progressed but Remains Incomplete. The idea with the article this month was just sort of to break down what we saw in 2025, some main takeaways from industry performance last year, and also just sort of as a note, our December newsletter, which you can find on our website, was actually a forward look at expectations and things to watch for 2026. Between the last 2 months, we have both your look back at 2025 and your look forward at 2026. But the newsletter this month touched on some national trends from 2025. We also touched on price class in particular. But one thing that I wanted to spend a little bit of time on today is a market or a regional look. And in particular, the relationship between rent growth, apartment demand, and occupancy, and sort of how all of those things affected each other last year and in some ways that I think are generally a little bit unusual if you look back over the last decade or so. And so in terms of average effective rent growth for new leases is how we're measuring that rent data. 13 of the bottom 15 markets around the country last year were in the Mountain West or Sun Belt. And again, just in broad strokes, generally, we would expect markets that underperform from a rent perspective probably have subpar net absorption. That's not what we saw last year. So last year, there was a little bit of a disconnect between net absorption and rent growth. And of course, that had everything to do with the new construction pipeline. So 2022 through last year, we saw a very active new construction pipeline, particularly in the Sun Belt and the Mountain West. And that new supply was enough to push occupancies down below their normal range, despite certainly over the last 12 to 18 months, fairly robust net absorption in most of those Sunbelt and Mountain West markets. We saw areas where apartment demand looked good, again, most specifically in 2025, but rent growth still sort of lagged what we saw kind of at the national level. And again, that was because of lower occupancies coming from new supply pressure. Where on the other hand, you had markets in the Midwest in particular where rent growth looked great. It was above average, and it has been for a couple of years. But that really had more to do with higher occupancies because of less new supply. And if you actually look at the net absorption numbers, absorption in a lot of those markets was average at best or often below average. And so one of the main takeaways from 2025 was that if you're just looking at market leaders in rent growth, you have to understand that you're generally not looking at the market leaders in apartment demand. And so as we look forward to 2026 and even into 2027, as new supply continues to slow down, particularly again in a lot of these markets that have been at the tip of the spear, as occupancy continues its recovery, which began last year, we would expect to see more of a sort of an expected correlation between strong demand at the market level and rent growth at the market. And so that'll be something to watch for 2026. A lot of these Sunbelt markets and Mountain West markets may actually still lag this year in rent growth because they've got a lot of ground to make up on the occupancy front. But we expect as the year progresses to start seeing some normalization in that relationship between demand and rent growth. So with that, I'll point you to our blog, alndata.com/blog, for written content that we're going to have coming up in the near future. And then also some speaking events that I have coming up. February 11th, I'll be speaking for the Southern California Rental Housing Association at their State of the Industry event. And then February 19th, the National Association of Home Builders IBS show. I'll be doing a session there that's in Orlando, and my session will be at noon. Details to come on that. But check our social media for details and registration information. Search for ALN Apartment Data on your social media of choice, and you'll find us there. Thank you.